This makes sense!
Good old Frank. I bet. Hey, here's the message. This is a public service This is a public service announcement to Christians listening right now. We're tired of Frank Turek. We atheists. Tired. We're tired of all you apologists out there. Well, I should speak to myself. I'm tired of Frank Turek. I'm tired of J. Warner Wallace. I'm tired of William Lane Craig. I'm tired of everyone. You guys are just saying the same old things. You could say the same thing about me. I'm saying the same old things, but I'm mostly responding. I'm a response channel. I'm responding to people, what they say. And they're saying the same things. It's getting tiresome. It's getting boring. But maybe some of you have something interesting to say or questions to ask me. And that's why I have this Theist Thursday. It's more about conversations, real conversations of giving a little, taking a little, hearing a lot, saying a little. I like that better. Hearing a lot and saying a little. So if you guys know anybody who might want to hop in here, you can give them a call, text them, tweet them, DM them. Say, hey, there's this guy named PineCreek. He's like, he's kind, caring, compassionate, loving, good-looking, great mustache, and he wants to have a conversation with you. You'll never get old to you, Lawrence Brown? Really? I'm doing well, Rory. Thanks for asking. Tomorrow, I'm taking my daughter to see Taylor Swift. I wonder how many middle-aged men will be there besides me. Was Doug drinking chocolate milk? Well, I know what joke you're trying to do, but Fenton Molly, please leave the comedy to the professionals, okay? Well, maybe I should do a poll on that while we're waiting for Theist to come in. Should I keep the stash? Lean yes, lean no, or let's add an option. Transform it into goatee. How do you spell goatee? Or beard? Oh, I always do that. There we go. Because this is, whether a God exists or gods exist is not that important. What's important is whether I should keep the mustache. Waffles. No! You do not think this is sexy? My mustache is not sexy to you? Can you imagine me drinking milk, white milk, and just dripping off the mustache? The mustache is not going to help your case at the Taylor Swift concert. You'll need aviator sunglasses to blend. Hell no option. I could easily put the beard in. I can go like that. I mean, I look at myself and I'm seeing Tom Selleck. I don't know what you guys are seeing. You know Tom Selleck from the 80s TV show Magnum P.I.? I can't tell the difference between him and me. And I'm usually good at this sort of thing. Rock the full beard. Does my wife like it? Stacy K. Can you leave now, please? Don't bring my wife's opinion on this My wife is usually so kind and careful with her words. Like when my kids were growing up and they say, "Mommy, I want chocolate," and she wouldn't say no. She would say, "Why don't you try a grape instead, or a banana instead?" But when I asked her, "Should I keep the mustache?" she said, "Hard no." But to be fair, I don't tell my wife what to wear. Like, I look like a BTK killer. Yeah, I know, Stacy. It's getting itchy. So I'll probably take it off. Take it all off. Of course, Magnum PI dates me. I mean, not Tom Selleck doesn't date me, but me knowing that show. Good day, Furrow. Are you there? I can't hear you, but I know you're there. I'll let you figure things out. This is a litmus test. See that theme song, Main PI? Iconic. Remember the butler's name? Wasn't it Higgins? Fufuro, I can't hear you. He's maybe going to try again. Hey, Doug, it's Jacob Hansen. You want to jump on a call? We were emailing the other day. Yeah, hop on in, Thoughtful Faith. Thoughtful Faith is a Mormon. If you shave it off, you'll have to lose your power like Samson? No. Samson was a weak man. If you need hair to make you strong, you're weak. Was he the butler or the owner of the estate in Hawaii? I think it was just the butler, right? Oh, yeah, and that red Ferrari, iconic. I remember my dad took me to a small town in Manitoba where a guy sold John Deere farm equipment. And he said, "Hey, guys, I want to show you something." I was, I don't know, 7 years old, 8 years old. Takes me to his garage, opens the door, and there's the exact same car as Tom Selleck on Magnum PI. Hey, Jacob, I can see you. Let's see if I can hear you.
Hey, Doug.
Yeah, there we go.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can hear you perfectly. Let me
Very cool.
put your face in here. How you doing today?
Doing all right. How about yourself?
Pretty good. I'm seeing Taylor Swift tomorrow.
Really?
Yeah. Do you like her?
No.
No.
I don't know. I don't find I'm actually a pretty big country music aficionado.
You're a Garth Brooks fan.
I actually grew up on Garth Brooks, and I'm even more purist than Garth Brooks. I mean, I'm talking Johnny Cash. I'm talking about Merle Haggard.
Well, it burns, 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 and the flames are higher.
Everybody needs to see the documentary by Ken Burns on country music. That is it. I mean, I liked country music, but after watching that documentary, it was kind of like, now I'm a diehard country fan just because I came to understand what the music is really about. So Taylor Swift just doesn't fall into that
I love
timeless country music
Well, yeah, she was a
genre.
traitor. I understand that, but I love country music in one situation, and that's when I'm driving from Arizona to Canada, because Canada's where I'm from. And I would sometimes take the off roads, and I'd listen to country music. I would roll down my window, and I would cry the whole way. I mean,
It's the stories, man. It's
yeah,
just
it's the
simple,
stories.
simple music. It's stories of our lives.
Whenever they sing about a dog, I say, I got a dog. And it's just like, I start crying.
All
So
right.
you want to talk about.
I was thinking about talking about morality. Uh, I'm kind of curious. Latter Day Saints, so far as I can tell, um, at least my understanding of our theology leads us to a very different sort of take on morality than traditional Christianity.
Oh, really? What's the difference?
So we reject divine command theory, so far as I can tell, because we believe that the moral standard is outside of the person and nature and, let's call it, the arbitrary will of God, right?
Wow. Okay.
Because I think that you and a lot of other atheists will make good points when you say, well, I have what I think is moral and God has what he thinks is moral. Like, what's to say that God's morality is the right morality if it's just his arbitrary will compared to my arbitrary will, right?
Yep.
And I think that's a valid critique. That's the divine command theory. You deal with the Euthyphro dilemma and things like that. Now I will say I think there are the way that a classical theist will counter that argument will be to say, well, it isn't you aren't like it isn't God's arbitrary will. It is God's nature that determines good and evil, and he
Right.
is the standard by which good and evil is known because he is pure goodness.
Right. But it still doesn't bypass the Euthyphro dilemma, even if you change it to nature.
How so?
Because you can say, is God's nature what it is because it's good, or is it good because it's God's nature? Like, you just change the words.
Well, I would say let me think about that for a minute. Because if it is God's nature, they would say that God's nature is good because that is that is what goodness is. That was what we would define as the goodness.
Right.
So
But why
that
is his nature the way it is? Why
his
is.
nature is his nature is the way it is because it has been and always been that way eternally. Now I'm making an argument that I'm not actually I'm trying to steel man their point of view. And my take is the way I think that they would answer that question would be to say that God's nature is eternal and it is eternally good. And you can't ask like, why is God's nature good? Because it's like asking, why is the good good?
Yeah, it just basically comes down to definitions, right? Because we just defined it as such.
Yeah. And that brings an interesting question around to the atheistic perspective to say, well, why is what you call good actually good?
Uh, Again, yeah, by definition. So then the question is, who has the better definition?
But the tough thing is when we say who has the better definition, the word better is also implying that there's some way that some
Yeah,
definition of good can be considered more aligned with some standard of goodness or rightness.
or you don't even have to go to a standard. You could go to a desire or a goal.
Yes.
Yeah. So let's say
But
your goal
but
is to have less rapes in the world, and I share that goal with you. Then the question is, how do we achieve this goal? What's the best way to achieve that goal?
yeah, now the question though is are any goals better or worse than any others? Or are all goals is all morality ultimately
Preference.
uh relative to the arbitrary goals of whoever has it? Maybe, in Viking society, our goal was to go and rape and pillage the English across the channel. And so it was good for us to do things that accomplished that goal. So again, I feel like it just pushes the problem back another step.
I don't even see a problem.
Well, and I guess I would say is that I agree. There is no problem if we do agree that all morality is ultimately arbitrary and there is no real right and
Well,
wrong. There's just preferences that are being
I
expressed.
wouldn't use
And
the word arbitrary. I would just use the word subjective, because arbitrary seems to say that there's no reason. Like, uh, people can disagree on why rape is wrong, but they can have reasons why it's wrong that are different, right? One can
yeah,
say
but
it's wrong
those,
because God said so. Another one can say it's
yeah,
wrong
and that,
because the person doesn't want to be raped.
yeah,
So it's not
and all of
arbitrary.
those, but just because you give a reason doesn't mean that that reason itself is not an arbitrary reason. I could say, don't rape, people because, you know, I don't like that.
Well,
Well, it's
what
like,
do you mean by
well,
arbitrary? What makes something arbitrary and what makes something not arbitrary?
arbitrary would be something that's not related. And I'm trying to think how to explain this. It would be something that is not related to any sort of an objective standard, right? There's no like, here's something that we would say is arbitrary, right? I like Captain Crunch cereal, you like Cheerios.
Okay. That's
That's
arbitrary?
just an that's just an arbitrary preference. We may have reasons for it, but there's not one that's right or wrong, one that's better or worse. There's no way for us to evaluate the argument. And this is, as so far as I see it, is sort of the postmodern conundrum, right? It's sort of what happens when you remove any objective standards of rightness and wrongness, is that everything ultimately becomes arbitrary. All value judgments become arbitrary and based on the random chances of, let's call it, biological circumstance.
Yeah, I would say the reason why we tend to choose the standards we choose is because we evolved this way. We're animals that evolved this way. But how did your standard of morality is this objective idea that exists independent of God, right?
Yeah, so I guess I'll switch now to more of a my positive case, or sort of the way that I view the moral system.
Well, but my first
Um,
question is,
oh, go ahead.
your did you choose that standard of morality? Whatever it is, right? We haven't fleshed it out
I
yet,
would
but
call it I would say that it's inherent in the nature of reality itself.
okay. So whether one believes it, accepts it, chooses it, it's irrelevant.
Yeah,
It
it's
just
inherent
is.
in nature. And I don't even want to say nature as in like the natural as that term gets defined, but in the fabric of reality itself, it's built into what constitutes reality.
And why do you believe it? So I'm hearing it sounds like this concept of objective morality is a necessary being, but it's not a being.
Yeah, it's a necessary condition, is what I would say, to the nature of being itself.
Okay. And okay, now describe what it is exactly. Is it a
So
mind?
I would say that the nature of being, for us at least, I can't speak necessarily for all things, but is that we all it's an observation that Plato has made, that uh, I'm sorry, other philosophers have made this. It's our desire for well-being, the desire to avoid suffering. I think Sam Harris makes an excellent observation that, and I don't know that he necessarily made it in this way, but I do. It's that being exists in a constant tension between two poles. One I'll call the pole of suffering, let's go imagine going as far into suffering as you possibly can go, and then you frame the other aspect of being as being well-being. We'll call it the opposite of suffering as far as one can possibly
Okay,
go.
let me ask a question. If all sentient beings in the universe cease to exist, would this objective morality still exist?
Yes.
But there's no one suffering. There's no.
I would say that it exists because it's inherent in the nature of the way that reality exists. I have a hard time understanding what reality is without sentient beings, without sentient anything. I actually am a panpsychist, so
Uh-oh. I had one of those on that last week. Did you see that?
I actually didn't. I'll have to check that out.
Wait a minute. You're a panpsychic and psychist. How do you say it?
Panpsychist.
Psychist and a Mormon.
Latter-day Saint theology goes, like, really tightly in with the panpsychist worldview. Joseph Smith's theology is very much panpsychist in if you look at what he says, because he talks about that matter and spirit, or that spirit is matter, just more refined, you might call it, or there's some idea of the intelligences in reality. It's pretty deep stuff, but
So you
yes.
believe in remote viewing and all that sort of thing?
I don't know that I go that far. I don't have a lot of details on exactly what it means, but I do believe that the mind body problem dissolves if you begin to I believe that matter is far more complicated than people realize, and I think that mind is inherent within matter itself. That's kind of my personal theory. I think it can I could make a case for why it's consistent with LDS theology. Um, and there's a lot of Latter-day Saints who have that sort of a view of the world that is essentially panpsychist.
Hmm. Okay. Well, let's finish up with the objective morality thing. So
So,
it's not a mind, though. You're saying it's outside of God.
yep, it's
Um,
eternal.
and what came first, this objective morality or God?
In when you talk about the eternal, there is no what came
Okay, so
first. It's
objective
just
morality
always
is
exist.
co-eternally existent with God.
Yes. We in Latter-day Saint theology, you'd hear talk of what's called the eternal law. The eternal law that even God is subject to. I think that's a scriptural way of saying, we might say today, something like eternal reality. The nature of things, like as they must be, the necessary conditions for existence itself, even the existence of God.
Okay. And so God is subject to this eternal law
Yes,
that
absolutely.
exists outside his own nature.
Yes, and believe me, the classical theists, they are really angry at us when we say that God is subject to something, and we're just like, well,
So so does that lower God's omnipotence to you?
no, because when he is omnipotent, he has even the classical theist will have to admit that God is limited, um, for instance, by the laws of non-contradiction and things like that. Which is to say that there has to be something that limits God in some way, right? Even if he's limited by his own nature, which is another thing that they'll say, and that's fine. But that's a limitation you're placing on God. So radical notions of omnipotence are logically incoherent.
Okay. So after hearing all this, as a naturalist, I could just say, okay, I'm okay with that. Now what? How do we know what this is, this objective morality?
So I would say that it's that which moves someone closer to ultimate well-being. Okay, and I think well let me first actually back up just one step. Um, I don't think it's escapable. Every action that you do ultimately has the same goal. When you talk about goals, one of the things that we tend to think is that we actually are talking about that people have different goals. Here's a really radical thing that I think is 100% true, is that we all actually have the same goal ultimately.
Yeah, to not suffer.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And every action you do, us talking right now, is connected to our desire to move farther away from what I call ultimate suffering, whatever that is. And then we want to move towards something that we consider some conception of what I call ultimate well-being.
Okay, but how
Okay.
do we do that though? Like, doesn't this objective morality, it should help us get there, right?
Yes. Well, that's the great moral debate. I'm not saying I have the answer to every moral question. What I'm saying is this is framing what we're talking about when we're dealing with the question of what is morality. What are we even talking about when we talk about morality? We're ultimately talking about suffering.
Right. But it now leads us to all this conversation's irrelevant because I could say, no, there isn't this objective morality thing out there. I don't think it is. It could be, but I don't think it is. And you say, I think it is. But we both share the same goal of reducing suffering, increasing well being. So, what does it matter if it exists or not?
I think I would say that it exists whether you think it exists or not, because suffering exists. And if someone was to say that suffering doesn't exist, maybe as a thought experiment, I'd punch them in the face, and
Okay.
then they could find out the suffering does indeed exist, and it's not just
So, you're
all.
saying it's impossible for this objective moral law that has always existed, it's impossible for that to cease, to not exist if they're suffering.
Yeah. Suffering,
Okay,
I would
why?
say being itself, because inherent in being, you always exist within being between these two poles. You constantly are flapping your wings against suffering, trying to keep yourself. I don't know how to frame being without suffering. I think they are
Right, but
necessary
let's
conditions
say
for one
someone gives
another.
you all that, says, yeah, okay, everybody suffers, and the goal is to not to lower that suffering. But why does the fact that suffering exists mean automatically that this objective moral law has to exist?
I guess what I'm positing is that I don't. I guess I'm struggling to understand. Like, I'm saying that it does exist because it's part of the necessary conditions of being itself. I guess I'm having a
Yeah, I
like I thought that
understand that. You said that earlier, but let's imagine it didn't exist. Okay,
okay.
there's no objective morality that's has always existed in
So
eternal
there's no
past.
suffering
Okay, then that's my question. Why couldn't there still be suffering?
because that's what morality describes. It describes the relationship of something to suffering.
But just because morality, your version of morality, objective morality, describes suffering, we could still have suffering without it, couldn't we?
No.
Why
My whole
not?
thing is let me pull this back. I can't make sense when someone talks about morality without without it being framed as a discussion ultimately about suffering and well-being. I don't know what they're talking
Right,
about.
suffering and well-being exists, but I'm saying, let's say suffering and well-being exists without this objective morality. Why is that impossible?
I guess I would ask you, what do you mean by morality if
No,
you're not talking
your
about.
definition of objective morality, how you just described. I'm saying,
Uh-huh.
why is it impossible for suffering and well-being to exist, and yet your version of objective morality not exist? Why do you tie those two together so tightly? Why do you say it's impossible?
Why do I say it's impossible? Because when I use the word morality, when I talk about objective morality, I'm talking about suffering and well-being.
Okay, so you're just doing it by definition then.
Well, that's what I think it is by definition. I think that there's no way to discuss morality coherently without discussing. That's what people are talking about when they talk about morality. Like, if you ask, why is God good? Right? I like to ask us this: why is God good? And the thing is ultimately, if God caused me nothing but suffering and horror and everything, you wouldn't call him God. You'd call him the devil. The problem is that well-being is ultimately the reason that you even care about God at all. Like, like, you do, like, this is the classical theist. I have to tell him, like, you do judge God to be good. And the standard by which you judge God to be good is well-being, because that's the reason that you say God is good, is because he leads you towards better well-being. If he didn't, then why would you call him good?
Okay, but let's say God himself told you, God the Father himself told you, as an omniscient being, there is no objective morality. But
I
yet
would ask him, what do you mean there's no objective morality? Like,
he tells you that all morality is subjective. You yourself agreed that, God's a subject. I think you said, maybe you didn't say that, but God as a subject says, hey, I think this is what is best for my people, my children, but all morality is subjective. If he came down from the heavens right now and said, Jacob, you're wrong, there's no such thing as objective morality, but we still see suffering, we still see well-being, how would you explain that?
I would have no explanation, but I also would not think that God would be able to ever say that, because this is something that I believe transcends even God.
Right, I know you believe that, but what I'm asking you to do is to think about other possibilities that may exist. Like,
Oh, and I have. I would, and in fact, that's the way that I arrived at this conclusion was, and I'll say this primarily, I cannot make sense of any talk of morality, and like, you can feel free to try and show me something that's coherent, but when people talk about morality, they're talking about suffering every time, without fail. If they're not, then
right?
I don't, they're just words coming out of their mouth that make no sense, because there's no rhyme or reason to it. So if
Well,
somebody wanted to
actually,
posit.
I could probably think of some examples where one can talk about morality and not suffering. Like, think about someone who has sex, consensual sex, feels really good,
Mm-hmm.
really good, and then they die, and that's it. Now, a lot of Christians would say, but let's say it's outside of marriage, okay?
Okay.
A lot of Christians would say that's a sin, that's bad, that's immoral. I don't
Mm-hmm.
know if you would say that. Would you?
Yes, I would.
Okay. Where's the harm done?
I would say, well, I would only say that it's immoral and wrong if, in fact, if my worldview is correct and there's an afterlife and that this ultimately will have a negative effect on their eternal well-being. But if it doesn't, then you're absolutely right. There's nothing wrong with any of it. In fact, there's nothing wrong with anything that you do. There is no
What?
there.
Is you saying if there's no eternal life,
Well,
then there's
no.
nothing
I
wrong
guess
with what
I
you
guess
do? Because there's still
let
suffering
me
here
back
on
that up.
planet Earth.
Let me back this up a step. To me, so if there is no afterlife, the only well-being that I experience is my own. And so I am the measure of anything that is morally good or bad because it affects my suffering either for better or for worse. Okay? So one of the great conundrums that I've got when I've read people like Sam Harris, and that I think that I do believe that atheists can establish a system of morality, but it will look nothing like the system of morality that most people talk about when they talk about morality. It will become inherently selfish because ultimately the only well-being that you have is your own, and all people would ultimately be a means to the ends of your own well-being, and that would be the most coherent basis for it. Now, on a religious basis, someone might say, well, but see, I believe that all people's well-being is ultimately interconnected, and I believe that like universally. Like, I don't believe you can get away with harming anyone else without ultimately some sort of cosmic justice coming back and causing you harm. So to harm someone else is to harm yourself, and therefore you
Right, but
should
in the
not
example
do
I
it.
gave you, both people on planet Earth are not harmed.
Yeah,
There's
so there's
no,
nothing wrong with it.
and we'll just say in this hypothetical, there's absolutely no suffering. In fact, the
Oh, it'd be
opposite.
moral. It would be a moral act for them to do that. They both increase their well-being during the time that they existed, and then they cease to exist.
With the coitus before marriage?
Yeah, absolutely. On your view,
No, no, I'm
100%.
saying on your view.
Well, in my view, there is an afterlife, and there is
Okay, what's this afterlife that will cause suffering? Hell?
the afterlife that will cause suffering is the fact that they will not have developed because they engaged in sexual acts with one another.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and how do I put this?
They
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 fell
didn't reach
short.
they didn't reach their full potential.
Exactly.
Yeah.
To not reach your full potential, to not be married. Here's the way I'll put it.
Okay, but hang on.
Reach
I
your full.
understand what you're saying, but the thing is, you're equating not reaching your full potential to suffering.
Yes, because no. Well, it is suffering compared to the ideal. Remember, suffering doesn't have to be like, I'm burning and it hurts. It's the
I
level
know,
of
but to
well-being
me
to
that's
which you
crazy
attain to.
because it's sort of like saying, I'm eating a Big Mac and I'm suffering, even though it tastes good and everything's great. Oh, I love that Big Mac. I'm still suffering because I could have had a buffet at the Encore in Las Vegas. That's the steak and ribs and all that. Sure, it could have been better, but you're not suffering.
Yeah, but exactly. That's and regardless, like I think we're parsing over little words here. I'm talking about what level to which do you obtain. One of the things that we talk about in Latter-day Saint theology is the idea of sort of kingdoms of glory, eternal progression. What is the highest level of being that you can reach on the eternal scale of things? And yes, to fall short of something that could have been higher is to become less than you could be, and that is. And when you put out the moral landscape as I've developed it, you are not as good as you could have been. And therefore, that is a form of, let's call it,
Yeah, to me
lower
that's a big
beings and higher.
stretch. I mean, when most people think of the word suffering, they think of something that doesn't feel good, something that hurts. But you're talking about you can win a bronze at the Olympics, but you're still suffering because you didn't win the gold. I mean, to me,
Yeah.
that's kind of really pushing
Well,
it.
that's one of the crazy things about Latter-day Saint theology. We believe that basically everyone will inherit some level of glory after this life. And we've been called universalists for this. But we also recognize that just because you received the bronze medal, there's a recognition that you could have had more. Like, God wants to give you everything, and the question is to what level are you going to rise above what could be ultimate suffering? How far away from ultimate suffering can you get?
Yeah, to me that means it's meaningless because, of course, I don't believe this afterlife exists. So to me, the whole discussion of morality should be centered here on planet Earth. But
Absolutely. But what's funny is I would imagine that you and I have a very, very similar view when it comes to the
we're
things
both
on
Homo
Earth.
sapiens.
because we both say, but the thing is that and I guess this is where my kind of question comes in trying to understand sort of the perspective that you have. Like, let's say that I can increase my well-being by taking advantage of another person.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, is that possible? Is it possible for me to increase my well-being by causing harm to another human being?
Of course.
So why shouldn't I do that?
Because you can use concepts of empathy. Would you want someone to do that to you? And you can think about that. And you can say in the long term, if people keep taking advantage of each other, is that the type of society that we want to live in, and will it flourish?
But you're presupposing that I have to care about what other people think.
I'm presupposing that you're a Homo sapien and you evolved to want to live.
Yeah, and I would say that a Homo sapien who wants to live, I want to live and enjoy things as good as I can get them for me and those that I care about. And I don't care about everyone. I care about my tribe, my family, my people.
Yep.
And if we can enslave the smaller tribe and thus increase our well-being or me personally, my well-being during the 80 years that I'm here, why should I care? Like Nietzsche would say, you've just embraced the Christian slave morality that opposes slavery and preaches this universal goodness, and you won't shake it. But ultimately, like, it's about you and your tribe.
Yeah,
that's the natural order.
Yeah, I think that's the way it's always been. That I will protect my children before your children any day of the week.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It always starts with us, and then our family and friends,
and then
our communities.
If you could really benefit your community, wherever you decide to arbitrarily draw the lines of your community, like, why does do you think that people have to draw the lines around their community as the entire human race? Because to me, that's kind of arbitrary. Why not include all animals? Or why not draw the lines just around the people of my sort of race?
Yeah.
And
I think if you look, I think morality evolves over time. And I think if you and I went back 3,000 years ago, you and I would have no problem with slavery.
Yeah.
But today we do. Why is that? Because we evolved as primates to learn to see that we can make better societies, to not do certain things. And some people call this the social contract. It's trial and error. Let's try this. Let's get rid of slavery. Let's see how it works. Oh, you know what? We can still function.
But are you positing that there's a way to tell if one society has made progress versus another society? Like, you seem to be
based on goals. Yeah. So let's say I want to get a brick from point A to point B. We got 3 ways to do it. If 2 ways don't work and 1 way works, let's do that way.
Yeah, but the question is what's to say that your goal that you've created arbitrarily for your society is any better than the goal of the Vikings?
You don't have to, but you can say it isn't better, but you can look at shared goals. So if the Vikings have the same goal as I have, then you can say, okay, what's the best way to achieve that?
So it ultimately comes down to just whatever your goals are, that's the frame by which
I believe morality is subjective, yeah. But I do think that since, like you said earlier, that even though I'm a naturalist and you're a Mormon, we probably share a lot of the same goals. Why is that? Your answer would be because we're both all created maybe in the image of the Father God. Maybe could be your answer. My answer would be because we're all Homo sapiens.
I would largely say those are sort of in many ways the same answers, in the sense of that we are both still, whether we're Homo
Well, yeah.
sapiens,
I mean,
we're
Homo
the same
sapiens
thing in some
evolved
way.
without a god. Yeah.
But I guess my question is, so you would then posit that you don't say that Nazi morality is somehow less valid than yours, it's just different. There's no standard by which you can say that Nazi
No,
morality
there is
is
a
wrong.
standard.
Well, what is the
My
standard?
standard is well-being, unnecessary suffering, same as yours.
Yeah, but what I guess what I'm saying is but for who?
For who?
Yeah, you say you don't
For the
want
most
suffering in that
people possible.
for the most human beings possible.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, what if okay, so let's say that's your goal and I share it. Now let's say that
So the reason why I would say that my
Adolf
stand,
Hitler comes in. Yeah, no, no, I can see where you're coming from.
yeah.
What I'm saying is that, but is there any presupposition that you seem to presuppose that your goal is somehow better than the goal of Adolf Hitler?
Uh, I would say yes, better in the sense that it achieves the goal that
Your goal, not his goal.
right, right. So then I would have to look at Adolf Hitler. If I just said to Adolf Hitler, my goal, my standard, my goals are better than yours. And he says, no, Doug, my goals, my standards are better than yours. No, 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 no. Then we have a conversation of trying to convince each other of whose goals are better. Well, you see that Jewish child suffering over there? Like, imagine that was your child. Would you want that? No, of course not, because I'm not Jewish. You don't expect. Well, but think about it. They got two hands, two legs, two eyes. They're very much like you are. We would have a debate. We would have a conversation. And I don't think
But
there's.
my thing is I don't think there's any standard by which watching that debate, if I posit that there is no standard by which to judge who won the debate. You seem to be presupposing that there's a standard by which that debate could even be judged.
I would appeal to people's moral intuitions, which you would say is given by God.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Whoa. That I love that answer, by the way.
Well, this is how most morality is done, is through moral intuitions. Now the question is, where do those intuitions come from?
Well, are those ultimately those intuitions arbitrary? Because here's the other thing you could say. You could say that, let's say that a person evolved, or just their natural temperament that they were born with, an extreme lack of empathy, and they didn't care. Like,
Yeah, and those people are called psychopaths.
You're right.
Yeah.
And what I'm saying is
Which is
by
evidence
what
that your
standard?
form of morality is probably wrong.
Well, what I'm saying is that if there are psychopaths out there, and there are people out there who lack these moral sentiments or whatever, who's to say that they're wrong? See, the thing is it ultimately comes down to just arbitrary power and preference.
I think I got it. I think I know why you like your system better than mine, because it gives you more gravitas. It gives you more oomph. It says, I can say that there's ultimately a right or wrong answer here, and you can maybe even say that God has said this is the right answer, even though he's not, like, it's not coming from him. There's a standard outside of him, but you need this oomph. Like, Hitler was wrong, full stop. And I can say it's wrong because it goes against the subjective standard, where Doug can only say, well, it just doesn't achieve certain goals, and it's not really ultimately wrong. This is, I think, why a lot of people gravitate to what you believe. Because you want this realiness, you want this ultimateness.
I would frame it a little differently. I wouldn't say because I want it, as much as I would say, because that's a question on, that's us debating my desires. What I'd rather say is, my personal thing is I see that is what people want. I'm describing what actually is.
Right.
And what is that everyone desires their well-being, ultimately, everyone. We just go about different means.
Well, I wouldn't say
achieve
everyone, but some people commit suicide.
Yes, and I think they do that because they think it's
Some
to
people cut
escape suffering.
themselves.
They think they are leaving a state of suffering for a state of non-being, which they see as preferable.
Right, but I cut, people, there's a lot of teenage girls that cut themselves and sort of thing.
And they do that because it relieves their stresses in some way. That's what they say.
You
will always give that sort of an answer.
Yeah.
Real quick, I do have to leave in like 5 minutes. So I want to kind of, before we get through this, is there anything that you want to wrap up? I don't want to just kind of cut out too quickly.
What evidence, or what would you say is the reason why you think? I know you, with the morality part, you would say it exists, the subjective morality exists because it just has to.
Mhm.
Would you give that same answer for the God of Mormonism? It just has to exist? Like, are you a presuppositionalist when it comes to?
I'm not a presuppositionalist. Well, I don't know. This is kind of a tough one. So you're basically asking, why do I believe in God?
Yeah.
So there are various reasons. I would say ones that are the most convincing to me, on a if I'm just going to go with like a rational level, I find the fine tuning arguments, for instance, to be incredibly compelling. I think there are good reasons to believe in intelligent design. I believe that there are. I believe the universe is rife with specified complexity, and I don't see any cause for specified complexity outside of that of a mind.
But the
And
God of
so,
Mormonism, like you, the fine tune, none of those.
so
Yeah.
to the specific
Yeah.
Latter Day Saint version. So, okay, so let's just say I'm a general theist first,
Okay.
and then I became a Christian in the sense that I believe that the New Testament story is, if there is a God who has interacted with the universe, I believe that the New Testament narrative is the best account for that God interacting with the world. I don't see any other story that's that's more compelling than that one. And then, so now I'm a Christian, general Christian, mere Christian. Then within the Christian framework, I find that the Latter-day Saint conception of Christianity and God and the nature of God is far more compelling than that of other Christian explanations.
Okay. So now, if this is the outsider test for faith, if a Mormon said, well, first, fine tuning argument, the theological arguments, ontological, that's why I'm a theist. But I look at the Quran, I read the Quran, and I say, if God interacts with his creation, this is the best form of it. Would you say that's a good reason to believe in the God of Islam, Allah?
I'd have to understand what he has to say. If he could make a compelling case, then
But if
yeah,
he
maybe I'll.
basically parroted what you just said,
Well, no, I'm not making a fully comprehensive argument here. I
I
couldn't
know,
do that
but
in
you
3
basically
minutes.
said that you yourself have looked at, if this God interacts with his creation, it seems like the New Testament, the Book of Mormon, gives the best account for this God.
Well, let's say the New
A
Testament
Muslim could
first.
say the exact same thing, right?
Yeah, but I would have to hear if their case actually made any rational sense, and if it and I would use a variety of different methods to analyze 2 competing claims. Okay, Christians claiming we have the best explanation for God interacting with the world, and then you have the Muslim saying we have the best explanation for God interacting with the world, and then you have
Okay,
to evaluate,
why
okay,
do
well,
you
on what grounds are
think?
you guys saying that?
I understand that you would look at the go into the details, but why do you think right off the bat that this Muslim sees it as the best?
Probably because those are the reasons that he's aware of, and he's heard reasons that are compelling to him.
Yeah, it's the reasons that he's aware of, and it's probably the way he was raised, right, in the culture that he's in. So it resonates with him. Everything that he's
Yeah, absolutely.
lived
Oh, my
through
feed died. Can you hear me?
comports, resonates to Islam. Do you think
Yeah,
that's?
sorry.
Do you
Did I
think?
just break up there? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Do you think
Okay.
that's what happened to you? That the one of the reasons why you
Absolutely.
see it as the best is because you were raised in the culture in the United
Hun
States.
100%. So I am very cautious about what's called the genetic fallacy, and that is to reject something as false because of where it came from rather than based on its merits. And so what I try and do is understand as much as I can outside of my tradition, study atheism, study Islam, study other faiths. Believe me, I'm all about hearing what other people have to say about what I believe, or and also hearing what they believe. But ultimately, I still have not been given good reasons to believe that God does not exist. I've not been given good reasons to believe that there's some alternative form of theism out there that's more compelling than Christianity.
What do you think would be the biggest reason to say God doesn't exist? If you were to steel man the other side.
The most compelling arguments I find for the non-existence of God, I would probably say the problem of evil is one. that I think can be very, very difficult
Yeah,
for
like
many.
I would say that within Mormonism, same with traditional evangelical Christianity, there's the concept that God is all good. He doesn't want sin, right?
Hmm.
But yet he desired to create something he knew would lead to sin.
Yeah, no, it is the believe me, we could. I actually got to get rolling here in
I
just a
know,
minute, but
but to
the
me,
problem
that's a
of evil is
huge defeater for
it's a
yours.
massive. I would say, and I would say to classical theism, that's one of the number one reasons I'm not a classical theist or a classical Christian, because I think the problem of evil is absolutely devastating to the traditional Christian worldview who believes in creation ex nihilo.
If it's
I think that
absolutely devastating, why do you still believe it?
it's devastating to the traditional
Why isn't it
Christian view
devastating to yours?
because God didn't create everything ex nihilo. God is doing what he like suffering exists within the reality that he inhabits, and he's trying to help us to get as far away from that as possible. He didn't create the suffering. It's inherent in reality itself.
Okay, if he didn't create the suffering, but he can still do stuff about it, though, right?
Yeah, and I believe that he does all that he can do without stopping our further progress.
Are you open theist as well?
Yes.
Ah, so you're an open theist panpsychist.
Open theist, panpsychist, Latter-day Saint.
Oh my goodness. Whoa.
So there's a lot to it. Anyway, I got to get rolling. But
Okay.
hey, it's been great chatting, Doug.
Yep.
One of these days, maybe you'll have to come on my channel sometime. I'd like it. I got about
Sure.
6,000 subs, so I have some people that are listening to me. I'd like to introduce them to you.
Sure. Tit for tat. That's fair.
All righty.
Take
Hey,
care.
thanks, Doug.
Bye.
Take care.
Arturo, thanks for waiting.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes,
Wait,
I can.
let me.
I can hear you.
Yep, okay. So where you want to start? You want to continue from any of the subjects there?
Well, you heard that whole prior conversation?
Yeah, I was listening. Yeah.
Do you share some of the same sentiments as Jacob?
Well, I also believe that there is an objective morality, but not because of the same source that he believes in.
You think it's from the nature of God?
Yes, it's from the preference of the eternal creator. Yes.
Okay, and which eternal? I know this sounds rude, but which eternal creator do you believe in? I know, and you're probably thinking there's only one, but what's his name or her name?
Well, I don't name it. I just call it the creator, and I view the creator as an eternal being who is able to create our realities. But I also view us, conscious humans, as eternal beings and not created by the creator. The creator creates our realities, but the creator is somehow in symbiosis with the conscious beings of also eternal nature. So there's a little twist there. I cannot be called, therefore, a traditional Christian. But I also believe that Jesus represents the creator, and not just represents, but he was the creator in human form. And coming
that
back
makes
to
you
the
a Christian, right?
yeah, that kind of a Christian, but a heretic at best. So I'm going to be a major heretic because basically with every major tenet of the Christian religion and faiths, I have serious arguments with. Starting with the omniscience of the creator, I guess, which is an impossibility and absurdity, and I simply believe that the creator does not know how conscious beings will decide.
Okay.
That's one.
So you're kind of an open
twist
theist as well.
I'm not really big on terminology. If you define open theist in a sentence, I can say if I
So this
agree or
God that you
not.
believe in is a creator, but not omniscient.
Not omniscient, yes.
Okay.
If that's it for open theist, then yes, yeah, I am an open theist.
Okay.
I'm also
It's a very simple question.
also-
Why do you believe the creator God exists in the first place? Why do you believe it?
Yeah, I simply I simply deem that more likely than the materialist scenario, which basically says that my observations, if I examine in detail enough, will explain my reality, my essence, and my being, meaning my consciousness. and I see that it's completely lacking, completely insufficient. It's
Okay.
basically the emergence of the gaps argument instead of God of the gaps argument. So I don't see that possible that from the quarks interaction of the 12 quantum fields that there is an existence according to the quantum theory. All of a sudden and randomly and accidentally we developed as conscious beings. I see that as absurd.
Okay, so you're saying it's more likely that this God exists because of consciousness.
That's the biggest problem that I would have to reject materialism for. Yes.
Okay.
And then,
but you went further.
There's a lot.
You went further than that. Though.
Yes.
You basically. Well, you did say that you believe that a man 2,000 years ago was this God.
Yes. Basically, I mean, there's a long reasoning, and there's a philosophical reasoning that basically gave me a set of conclusions. And then I'm looking at the story of Jesus, and not necessarily how Christians interpret it, but what I distill from the New Testament. Forget about the Old Testament. I reject it as is. But the message of Jesus, as I distill it from the New Testament, perfectly aligns with my philosophy. So that's why I believe that it's absolutely feasible that the Creator wanted to have an intervention in our reality, and the way He arranged that is through Jesus. And it's not about a powerful demonstration of might and supernatural power, but it's a demonstration of love, and it's a demonstration. It's an urging for us to reach our salvation. I don't believe Jesus saved us. Jesus made an intervention. Jesus formalized the eternal word of God, which is to align with love versus selfishness. That's what I got from the New Testament. And he made a testimony. He came down in human form. He subjected his whole being to us, and went through suffering and death, so that there's a demonstration of love. And it's for us an example that even if there's suffering and
Arturo, you gotta
misery,
you gotta shorten things up a little bit.
Okay.
Yeah,
So anyway, there's a lot of
much.
details so far. Yeah.
Why do you believe this Creator God wants to interact with His creation? Okay,
so when I analyze our reality, I see I'm searching for the motivation of the Creator for it. Why is this reality arranged as is? Why is there suffering of different degrees? It's very, very important.
Why does this Creator want to interact with His creation is my question. Why do you believe that?
Because He wants us to succeed in the evaluation.
How do you know He wants us to succeed?
I don't know. I deem that the most likely scenario.
You just want it to be true?
I rationally reason. I'm basically weighing and analyzing my surrounding, and I came to the conclusion that the only factor that the Creator is interested in, must be interested in, which He does not know, is how we decide in life.
Like, why couldn't a Creator God create everything and just sit back and laugh?
That's one scenario. That's one scenario that I also weighed. And because of the predispositions that we have towards love, as all humans do, I believe the decision, the evaluation decision, must be on how we either align our life with love versus how we align our life with selfishness. And that can be applied to the kings, that can be applied to the slave owners, the slaves, to the most primitive caveman, to the rocket scientists.
To love and stuff. Like, basically your answer is yes, this God could just have created everything, sit back and laugh, or this God could have created everything and wants to interact. And your reason to choose one or the other is because
we have predispositions that steer us towards love. I mean, you yourself as an atheist, you also
okay, but we can have we we could want to love people, and this God still sit back and laugh, and he has nothing to do with it.
Yeah, that's a risk that I'm willing to take.
What do you mean risk? There's no, what risk is there on either
The
option?
risk is picking a wrong scenario.
Like, what do you
of
mean?
reality.
What's the risk? What's the downside of picking the wrong
The
scenario?
risk is I'm living my life according to a scenario that I deem to be the most likely.
I know, but let's say you chose the one that says God created everything and just sits back and watches with hands folded and laughs. Let's say you chose that one. What's at risk?
That would be basically equivalent to a materialistic scenario. It's the same thing. At the end of the day, it's the same thing. God created this whole thing and he doesn't care. And it's basically the same thing as
okay,
just have a material.
Sure, but what's that risk? What's the problem?
The risk is that there's nothing logically that can prevent selfish behavior.
Ah, so you're saying you need this God to interact to punish people?
I don't need it, but I feel that's the right answer.
Ah.
So it's different. I mean, you can also, as a Hindu, Muslim, atheist, you can also arrive at aligning your life at the right value, the right preferred value of the Creator, which I believe. And this, I believe, is what gets you real salvation. Not your belief, not what you believe, is how you align your life.
Okay, but
that's what Jesus was about.
Do you see evidence of this Creator God punishing people on earth?
Punishing people on earth? No. I mean, there's no direct consequence of bad behavior. Bad people.
Well, then why did you say what you said? You said you need this concept of God so people can do the right thing, right? Or behave properly. What's the carrot? What's the stick? Like, how does this God accomplish that goal?
Well, the stick is that every evaluation has consequences.
Right, but that could be true whether this God sits back and laughs or not. Like if I jump over a cliff and die from gravity hitting the ground, God has nothing to do with that.
Yes, but if there's an evaluation, that means God is actually caring. So once I conclude that evaluation is the most likely scenario that we're in, I also
but whether God cares about you or not, and you choose the wrong one, what's the problem? What's the risk if you choose the wrong one? What's the risk of saying God doesn't care?
If God doesn't care, if God doesn't care, it doesn't matter what I do. Whether I live a life aligned with love or not, it doesn't matter.
Why does it not matter?
It only matters. Why does it matter? God doesn't care.
Okay, so let's
live my life and that's it.
Let's give a specific example. Let's say you and I were to meet, and you have the choice or not to just wind up, take a bat, and hit me in the head. Are you saying that it doesn't matter if you hit me in the head with a bat if God doesn't interact with His creation?
No. First of all, I don't hold that value, but I have no tools and no logic to convince somebody who feels that. Somebody who feels he's going to hit you in the head and take your money because that's what he needs. He needs to buy a boat. Yeah. And he can accomplish that. I have no logical argument.
You still don't even if this God exists the way you think he does, because let's say someone takes a bat and is about to hit me in the head, and you say stop, and he goes, why? Because God is watching, and He's not going to stop you, and there's no risk to you if you don't hit Doug in the head, or if you do.
But you're failing your evaluation.
What?
You're failing your evaluation.
What's going to happen? How is introducing God going to change the scenario?
Well, basically, the purpose and the meaning and purpose of your life then becomes to succeed at this evaluation.
But you said there was something at risk. I still don't know what's at risk.
At risk is that you fail the evaluation.
Okay, and if you fail the evaluation, what happens?
Well, there's stories about that. There's the hell story. There is whatever. I don't necessarily believe in eternal conscious torment, but I can envision a scenario where it's well worth it not to get to that point.
So you basically okay? Are you saying someone shouldn't hit me in the head with a bat because they might go to hell?
Because you are here as well, that you weighed on your alignment with love versus selfishness, and by hitting you in the head, you're actually aligning with selfishness.
Okay, but that could be true whether this
Therefore, you're
God's sitting
failing.
back and laughing or not. Like this God, we don't need this God for that. You could just say that's a bad act. It's a selfish act. It's causing harm to Doug.
You don't need this. Yeah, you don't need this. You may not need this God because you also arrived at this conclusion. And the goal of this creator is for people to arrive at this conclusion, not to believe a specific set of tenets.
So are you saying this God's not needed? The belief in this God's not needed?
I don't think belief in God is needed, but it helps.
But it helps. Okay. Thanks for coming on, Arturo. I got Jerry waiting in the wings.
All right.
Okay, you heard it here first. The belief in God's not needed for morality or for bad hitting. That's a bad act. It's a selfish act. Oh, Jerry.
Hi, how are you?
Good.
I'm back.
You're back. What did you want to talk about?
Well, this time I want to talk about prophecy because I know that widely viewed is that Jesus never fulfilled any prophecy at all. And I think I have one that he actually did fulfill. And so are we able to go down that track or?
Sure. Sure. Which prophecy do you want to talk about?
Okay, the Daniel 70 weeks. You're familiar with that one, right?
Daniel 9, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, let me explain it to you the way that I read it. Okay. There's two divisions in there. There's 7-week and a 62-week division in there. You see, you know that, and the Jews and the Christians have never really had a good grasp on that. They never had a good explanation for that one. Mm-hmm. And the one that Jesus did fulfill was there was a count that started in around 455 to 458, somewhere around there, that he's the one that's in there that fails. And this, by the way, this does explain why Mark didn't have a resurrection narrative and why Jesus kept it a secret, because I think Jesus was intentionally trying to fulfill that prophecy. He came in and he went, and the only thing he had to do was to come and die during that 7-year window. But the prophecy doesn't really end there, because the count started a second time, and the second time is in 1535 by the Ottomans. The Ottomans gave the same decree to build the walls, and 62 weeks after that, Jerusalem is recaptured in 67, just a couple of years before it. And then exactly 7 weeks after that, at the end of the 69th week, there's this there's a section in Revelation 12 that talks about an astrological alignment, and it was Jupiter was in the belly of Virgo for 9 months, and there was a string of planets, and the rapture hunters went gaga over it, and they were freaking out. They thought the rapture was coming back then, and ever since then they've been looking at this sign. But this sign depicted the very thing that Daniel predicted, and that's exactly the 69th week after that decree by the Ottomans. And the other thing that happened then was that the Jerusalem, that's the capital. The capital was moved to Jerusalem, and so that was the other significant thing that happened at the end of that period in time. So what I'm saying is that we're basically in the Revelation. We're in the period of 7 years, the last 7 years right now, and so and I can explain Revelations in a way you've never heard before.
Oh, if we're in the last 7 years, what happens at the end of that 7 years?
The end of 7 years, well, we're still waiting. At the end of that 7 years, basically, Israel's supposed to repent. That's what's supposed to happen, supposedly, or not. It's not even it's not even sure. Actually, the scriptures really aren't that positive about whether it goes either way. Because Mystery Babylon, because a lot of people would look at that as Jerusalem, and that one does get destroyed.
How many interpretations of this prophecy are there? Do you know?
I've only heard two. Well, there's a few variations with the Christians. The rabbis only have one, and their interpretation, you got to throw that one out because it's not even close. They have to do a shell game with the dates. They move it. It's not even about. They make it all about the temple. It's not even about the temple. It's about the walls of Jerusalem, and so it's not even.
There's 4 main ones. There's
4 main ones.
There's 2 Christian ones, 1 Orthodox Jew one, and 1 secular one. And it all hinges on when the dates start. And even the Christians can't make it to fit exactly. So is the prophecy really that good if it's a little bit off?
No, I think it's actually very accurate because it was, I mean, the one date that we know of for sure is a 457 approximately date.
We know for
455,
sure
457.
approximately.
No, they know that one. Historically, they do know that one. But the Christians don't like it because it doesn't add up the way they like it. So they use like this prophetic years to make it work if they can, but they couldn't make it work. So they found another date in 444 or something that lines up with the crucifixions because they want the whole thing done and done. They wanted a done deal right there, and they're not looking at those two, the separation of the 7 week.
Do you think
and the
Jews in the
62 week.
first century were well aware of Daniel 9?
I think so. I think Jesus was well aware of it. And that's the reason why I think Jesus was saying, don't tell
So
people
if
who I
it's
yet.
if you can force a prophecy to come true, is it really a prophecy?
Uh, yeah, it's still a prophecy. But he didn't really force it to come true. He fulfilled. I think he saw his place in it, and I think he was going in intentionally uh, during that window of time during that last 7 years, and that's why he told
Like,
Mark.
what if there's a
"Don't
bunch
look."
of people who are aware of that prophecy, and there was a bunch of messiahs in the first century trying to fulfill it, saying so they can say, "Hey, look, everyone, I'm the Messiah," and they basically want to go down in history as the Messiah that was killed to fulfill Daniel 9.
Yeah, and then you can see that during that time in history, they were Messiah. They were going crazy that back then. They were expecting this thing because of that timeline, and I think they were all looking at that timeline and why there were so many Messiahs popping up back then.
Yeah. Notice the Daniel 9 prophecy doesn't talk about uh, specific names of people. Doesn't mention the word Rome.
Well, it does. Well, no, you're right. It doesn't mention Rome, and you know what? I think Jesus was looking at that and saying, "I'm the prince that's also going to come." So that's why he kept saying, if you read it, said, "Yeah, the people of the prince to come." I don't know if he was reading that as Rome. I think he might have been reading that as his own church, doing it basically. I believe that his own church is the one that set up
It'd
the
be cool,
abomination.
like if centuries before Jesus it said there'll be a Roman leader named Pilate who won't really want to kill the Messiah named Jesus, but gave in to the Pharisee leaders and he will be crucified. I mean, that you could make this prophecy so much better, right?
Well, supposedly it did with Cyrus, but Cyrus is a little bit. I don't know about that one. It seems like there are some things in there that I think might have been interpolations, put it that way. Since we know the second Isaiah was written much later, so there
Yeah,
is that.
but the fact that you can make a prophecy so much better, so easily, so quickly shows you it's not a good prophecy to begin with.
I think it's a fantastic prophecy because it went by a timeline, and especially when you look at a second count.
A timeline where there's four interpretations, four main ones that people disagree with. Again, it's not clear.
Well, did they read the prophecies that said that this vision would be sealed until the end?
I tell you, there's very knowledgeable Orthodox Jews who laugh at Christians when they bring up Daniel 9, say you totally got it wrong. And then there's Christians who laugh at other Christians who say, no, you got this wrong when it comes to Daniel 9. And then you got the secular historian saying, you guys are all wrong.
Well, what's the secular interpretation? I haven't heard that.
I studied this years ago, and I just remember there's a secular interpretation. But yeah, it's all in that time period. It's not nowhere going forwards. It's basically in hindsight. But anyhow, I'll let you go, Jerry.
All right.
Take care. Have a good day.
Yeah, sure. Thanks.
I've gotten two consciousness people. Jerry. Yeah, getting back to Jacob. How many Christians are willing to go there and say that objective morality exists co-eternally with God and God is subject to it? That's a pretty tough pill to swallow. You cut Jerry off there. Yes, I did, Jonas. He wanted to say God bless. That's important, right? Baked Alaska, you're back.
Hey man.
You're still Christian?
Oh, hold on. Let me mute this. Yeah. Still hanging on by a thread.
By a thread.
I'm engaging with your chat. You have a very lively and intelligent chat, so I commend.
Is there sarcasm in there?
No,
Oh,
not
okay.
at all. Not at all. I mean that sincerely. It's tough limiting, in the chat because like you're obviously like typing words out and you're limited in your ability to express ideas. But no, I meant that sincerely because we're kind of having a deep philosophical conversation in the chat while you guys have been while you've been talking with your guests.
What can I help you with today?
Well, what we were talking about in the chat was, I think what I kind of joined a little late today, but just about creation, and basically that it's for our benefit, and this is something that I kind of was coming to terms with like myself like recently a little bit, and trying to further my understanding of the faith and the logic behind it all. I think it only makes sense if you look at it that it's for our benefit. God is perfect. He didn't need us. And so therefore it has to be for our benefit. And in the Christian worldview, that makes sense because like if you could be reunited with God, there could be nothing really greater than that.
Well, then you have to be a universalist Christian.
And what do you mean by that?
Well, if you're saying it's for our benefit, given that we know throughout history many people have suffered terribly and then they die, and if you take the Christian worldview of eternal conscious torment, suffering will only get worse after they die. So, but if you're a universalist, you can bypass all this and say, okay, yeah, you suffered here on planet Earth, you were raped, you died of malnutrition, all these horrible things, but don't you worry, you'll be rewarded in the afterlife, whether you believe in God or not, because God is going to make everything right. But if yeah, so if you're not a universalist, you're in big trouble.
Well, I mean, I guess that's true on a certain level. I see what you're saying there. I mean, my only objection with that would be that see, there seems to be like a rub, no matter which way the answer comes out. Whatever, let's say, assuming like, let's just pretend for the sake of argument that the Christian theism is true, which I know most people, on your channel don't follow. But assuming it is, it's either people are going to be held accountable or they're not. And it's either, so like, as the way you just described it, yeah, sure. The person who, like, in other words, you could come up with these different hypotheticals, but ultimately, like, is there going to be accountability or is there not going to be? And like, where is that line drawn? You're always going to be able to point to some example and be like, no, this person, because something bad happened to them, they handled it a certain way, and maybe that's maybe that was their own fault. I mean, I hate to say it, I've like suffered a lot in my life through my own fault. Like, I can't blame that on exterior things. Like, I have to take accountability for all.
Well, in a way you can blame God.
Yeah, you can, but I mean, like, I guess why? I mean, but isn't that just skirting responsibility? Like, you could just blame.
You're responsible for what's in your control, right?
Yeah.
Was your birth in your control? Was your creation in your control? No. So in that sense, you can blame God that he created you, number one. And number two, he created you knowing with 100% certainty the bad things that people will do to you and the bad choices you yourself make that you're responsible for. All that could have been avoided if God just never created you.
Yeah, it could, right? But I think like embedded in that concept is the notion that we can rise above, that like no matter what happens to us, like we have the capability to rise above it. And if we didn't, like if our capabilities were of such a degree that like.
But so what about rising above? Like, you're still suffering on planet Earth, and if you're not a universalist, you're still going to face some type of judgment in the afterlife. Why not just, if I were God, I wouldn't have created anything.
I mean, but see, wouldn't that be limiting in the sense that like if you didn't, then it would almost be like kind of selfish of you not to, because like
I'm
you
God.
would,
Why is that selfish to choose not to create anything?
because you would then be denying like the gift of like happiness, essentially. Not
You
just
can't
not
deny anything to something that doesn't exist.
well.
You're only denying after existence.
Let's assume for the sake of argument, right, that like the person was going to be happy and and their parents were like, I'm just not going to have them because I don't want to deal with like a bratty kid and the expense of having a children. Like if that was their sole motivation, just being like, I don't feel like taking on the burden of having a kid,
Hmm.
even though they knew like my kid is going to be successful, happy, rewarded, he's going to live an excellent life. I think it would be hard to justify that. Someone would be like,
No, it's easy because that kid would never realize that they were not created.
yeah, they wouldn't, but I guess like, but that kind of just like, I guess the question is like, can you zoom back? Can you zoom out? And like, in any time you're making a decision, like, is the impact of the decision just like the immediate consequence, or are there broader implications, like to,
The
on
reason why
a,
most humans procreate is because of selfishness. I had kids because
yes,
I'm a selfish human being. We all are. I wanted to look at my life vicariously through my children. I wanted the hope, meaning, and purpose that children can give. If God, from my understanding of the Christian God, God's not selfish. He doesn't need
right,
to vicariously live through us. He doesn't need us. He doesn't need
no,
hope, meaning, and purpose. I mean, the fact that we exist is strong evidence that your God, the Christian God, doesn't.
no, I would say it's the opposite, because like I think the strongest argument for God existing is that he is the explanation for why anything exists at all, or else you're just left with just it exists inexplicably without any explanation, because
Okay,
under
yeah,
that,
I agree that that is a way to go, but I'm being very specific with the Christian God right now,
oh right, right,
has attributes of all good, all loving, doesn't like sin, not an ounce of it. Like if you believe in that type of God who can see the future, has free will, all powerful, if you believe in that type of God, then the fact
yeah,
that we exist, that the earth exists like it does, is evidence against that God. This is the real problem of evil. Now, if you want
right.
to believe in a God who just creates things and is an explanation of why things exist, and then just sits back and says, look what happened down there, then okay, fine. If that makes you sleep better at night, then believe in that God. I don't care.
No, well, but let's say, like, let's bring it back to your example, like when you were saying like why you chose to have kids, and I agree with you. Like 99% of the people do it for selfish reasons, but once you had them, and you experienced like the joy of having your kids and loving your kids, then at that point, and if you knew like my kid is going to get what he wants out of life, like he's not going to suffer and experience like we all experience like the difficulties of life. I'm oversimplifying it, but
Yeah, then it's
what
worth
I'm
it. I agree with you.
yeah, like so right, like you would do it because you'd be like, I'm giving them like the opportunity of like of experiencing life. And like even though personally, like ironically, I had a girlfriend for a long time and I never wanted kids because I always feared something bad would happen to them. So it's
Right.
like really ironic. I'm
But
taking this.
we're talking about a God who doesn't just fear that something bad will happen to people. He knows it if you believe in an omniscient
Yeah.
God. Now, you can be an open theist, but there's ways around this. But imagine going to have 5 kids. I plan to have 5 kids. And I know with 100% certainty one will live to the age of 40, but have some type of disease that every day of their life is in pain, severe pain. Or you can imagine this one will grow up to be a serial killer and kill hundreds of other people. You name it, something really bad about that one kid. And here's my choice. I can either have the one kid and 4 average kids who are average people in society, or none. Okay.
Right.
Now, me as a selfish human being, I might go, okay, I'll have the 5 kids, even though knowing that one is going to be really, really bad or really, really painful. But I still got the other 4. But when you view this from God's perspective of not being needy, not being selfish, this God saying, I really hate sin. I don't need these four because I'm content. So I'm going to have 0.
Right.
Right?
Well, I would agree with that if the analysis ended, if when you're weighing the costs and the benefits, like it stopped at like, what is the impact like on this planet? And it's like, because then you would basically say like, ultimately, like it's hard to justify the suffering, no matter how much good there was. It would be very hard to justify it because the stuff you could just easily say like, look, there's an equal amount of suffering, if not more, because we're just biological creatures, and so we have illness, and we're so subject to pain and suffering. Like even if there was no moral harm, there would still be all like the physical harms that we would experience. But I guess the way that the Christian explanation gets around that is by basically saying like, this is just like the first chapter in the story, and that you get the joy of the afterlife.
That gets me back to universalism. You have to be a universalist then if you want to stay a Christian.
No, but like I don't think you have to be a universalist, because like doesn't that just sort of assume that like it's somehow like the scales aren't tipped enough unless everyone gets into like, why does every single person have to get into the afterlife in order for
then you have to be prepared to say that this God created people knowing with 100% certainty that some will go to hell, and he said, I'm okay with it.
Yeah, I don't think he's okay with it.
Sure, he's okay with it because he created it. He could have chose not to. He desired to create a universe where he knew with 100% certainty some people will go to hell.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, but
you're
in
done
other
at
words,
that
like,
point.
I guess the way I would put it is like he was okay. Okay with it makes it sound like he's condoning it versus like he's willing.
He condones it in the sense that he created knowing with 100% certainty it will happen, and if he doesn't create it, it won't happen.
Yes, but I think that, but just because you have knowledge of something, that doesn't mean that you brought it about. Like it's still like because otherwise
he brought it about because he created it knowing with 100% certainty it will happen. This is why there's Molinists. They realize what I'm saying is true, so they try every way to get around it. This is why there's open theists, because they know what I'm saying is true, and they try every way to get around it. They say things like, well, God really didn't know the future because the future doesn't exist yet, and he couldn't even really predict it because, I mean, and then the Molinists say, well, those choices are coexistence with God eternally past, so even though God came first and created everything, somehow these choices, God knew what was going to happen, and if you are going to remain a Christian, you have to say, yes, God saw that Doug would reject him. God saw that when he dies, he'll go to hell, and yes, God created Doug anyhow. That is a huge problem.
Yeah, it is, but the alternative would be, because
the alternative is non-existence.
And yeah, exactly, non-existence or existence where we're like robots, which would be like, there would be no point of that at all.
You make it sound like this existence just has to be. I mean, no. If you're a God of the universe and you have a choice to make, to create or not to create. And by the way, this is another way Christians get around this. They know what I'm saying is true, so they'll just say, God had no free will in it. He was forced, he was compelled to create. He was kind of like, okay, I got to do it. I got to close my eyes. I know what's going to happen. This is going to be a train wreck. No. But no, some people say God's nature is one of creation. So he had to create. He had no choice. I mean, it's ridiculous the lengths that theists go through to solve the real problem of evil. But what they end up doing is they make God a little bit more like me and you. A schmuck, selfish, needy, can't see the future. Is not all powerful. It has some like, I need to express my love. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, right. Well, I agree with you. I mean, I think part of that is just because they haven't either fully thought out the implications of what they're saying, or they're just
see. I get you, Baked Ass. I get you. I know what you're saying. You're looking at the world around you and you're saying, we exist. We're here. Now I gotta explain this. I gotta consolidate, reconcile somehow how this God in my head can be X, Y, and Z, and yet I see all the pain and suffering. I see judgment. I see all these things. How do I fit this all together? Well, there's an easy answer. Your God doesn't exist.
Well, that could be one answer for sure. I agree with that. What I struggle with is why and I don't like to use the term atheist like a label like that, but why folks who don't believe, it seems like um the part that I struggle with is like there seems to be a way of reconciling it that's at least rational. You might not say like it's convincing, um, but it's at least rational, and there seems to be like a reward in like maybe it takes a leap of faith, like no pun intended, but there's a benefit of that approach versus the other approach where like I don't see what the benefit is of just other than just like saying like I'm committed to truth and this is the only thing.
The
Like
benefit
this
is
cardinal-
lower cognitive dissonance. I don't have to try to piece it together like you do. I don't have to say,
right.
why is this suffering here on planet Earth? I don't have to piece together how can an omniscient, all-knowing, all-powerful, all-loving God create such a universe like this? I don't have to piece it together.
Yeah.
It's vastly more plausible that this God is a creation of men rather than it creating men.
I mean, but don't you want to be able to be reconnected with your loved ones like upon death?
Maybe for a time, but no, not really. I don't want to live forever. If it means I have to live forever and ever and ever, no.
Yeah.
I want the party to stop at some point.
what would be the purpose of that? I mean, once the party ends, like it's like you're wiped into oblivion. It's like you never even existed.
Yes.
To me, there's no more frightening of a
Why does
thought
non-existence frighten you?
because it's all we have. Like the only thing we have is our
Yeah, but when
consciousness.
you don't have it, you're not worried about it.
True. It's I think it's just the annihilation of self. It's like it's just a scary
You're
idea.
too selfish, Baked Alaska.
Might be.
You value your own existence. Like 2,000 years ago, you did not exist, right?
Right.
Were you worried about that?
No,
Were you sad about that?
not at all.
Did you go on live streams to talk about it?
No.
Saying I wish I existed? No. There's nothing wrong with non-existence. There's nothing right about non-existence. It's just non-existence.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I mean, there is a certain like peace to non-existence. You know, like, and I've thought of that because I as much as I tend to call myself a theist, like, you know, I still obviously like I think like almost 99% of people like I don't know, and I wonder like it's very likely that, you know, when I die, like that's going to be the end of the story. I think maybe in part because our lives are so short, and like maybe if we lived 500 years or 1,000 years, maybe I would feel different. It's just like it feels like it's a really
That
short
day might
time.
come.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's the transhumanist movement and trying to get humans to live forever.
Well, I mean, look, going back to what we were saying earlier, like you don't think it's sufficient to say like, look, if you're gonna make an omelet, you have to break some eggs. Like there was just no other. God had no other. There's no other way of doing it. Like he realized like
Doing what?
there's
Creating?
creation, like that for our own benefit. He realized like I
But
could
Baked Alaska,
create.
you're still in this paradigm that this God had to create in the first place. What
No,
if
he
what
didn't
if there's a
have to.
real option on the table of not creating? You're assuming an omelet has to be made. No, I'm saying no.
I'm saying if you want the benefit of the omelet, you have to break some
Does-
eggs. Like
Does
there's no
the
there's
God
no
of the
other way
universe
doing it.
need an omelet? Does the God of the
He
universe
doesn't. No, he
want an
doesn't.
omelet?
I guess like if you were an all perfect being, you could be in isolation forever. Or apparently what happened at some moment, like, you know,
Oh, this is
whether
getting good. You're painting a picture right now of a God in isolation for eternity. Are you're almost making it sound like that's a bad thing?
Well, I think it's not. I think it's just if I think since God is like the concept is that He's all perfect, He would almost want to create more good, even if that came with some corresponding harm.
Okay, now listen to yourself. He would want to create more good. Is God all good?
Yes,
So would you say he's infinitely good?
I would say He's infinitely good. I mean,
But if we add just a little bit more goodness, it makes it better.
well, it's because it's it's like more whipped
Right.
cream on the
Like think of a scale. Like you honestly think you can put God on one side of the scale, and by creating, it makes the scale like even heavier? Like no.
Well,
Unless you want to say God is again not all good, and he can increase the goodness of existence by creating, then you have to say, well, God's not all there then. He needs a little more good.
yeah, well, I mean, now that I think of it, like, there are different levels of infinity. So you could have like He could be infinite, and then there could be even like infinity plus one.
Hey, man! This makes
that?
sense!
Frank Turek is listening in, and he's agreeing with everything I'm saying.
But like bringing it back to when you created your kids, like you said, you did it for selfish reasons, but ultimately, like you would still choose that creation because that like it brought about more good. So I think it's just analogous to that. And
What if I knew it would bring about evil? I wouldn't have created them. Like if I knew with 100% certainty that my son would grow up and go into a school and shoot 50 kids, do you think I would have created my son? If you did, I mean, I would be a douchebag, immoral. You would think I'm evil. And I'm describing your God.
right.
God created, knowing with 100% certainty in some views of Christianity, that some people would be born and use their free will to kill 50 kids at a school. And he said, you know what? I see that, and I'm going to create anyhow.
Yeah, with the caveat that those 50 kids are now going to be like in this eternal bliss for like.
Now that gets us back to universalism. Okay, you can say that as a Christian, but then you got to switch to universalism. Because you're basically that, and that's the only universalism is the only Christian viewpoint that can guarantee that all those 50 kids will go to heaven.
That can guarantee it, yeah.
Because what if they get killed and then they end up in hell? I mean, getting killed at school is one thing, but that's nothing compared to what's awaiting them. If you believe in ECT,
I don't think they could go to hell. I don't think like in Christianity they would go to hell. I don't know.
If they've rejected Jesus Christ as their Lord and personal Savior, if they've heard a clear presentation of the gospel and they've rejected it, you're saying they're not going to go to hell?
As kids, they're not like probably.
Well, okay, when I'm saying kids, I'm just talking like 10-year-olds, 12-year-olds, 15-year-olds. Like, the age of accountability, you might say. But even then, there's Christians who believe, well, just because you're a kid doesn't mean, like there's Calvinists out there who say that this is why they baptize kids. The Catholics and some Protestants is because they think this magical water will have some effect and guarantee their kids go to heaven when they die. And if they don't baptize their kids, they might go to hell. Children going to hell because they haven't had the magical water sprayed on their heads. This is all crazy. You Roman Catholics, if you're listening, you're nuts. Especially those Roman Catholics who believe that they eat a cracker and some wine and it magically turns into Jesus Christ. You Roman Catholics, you are nuts. You are crazy. You are a product of the Enlightenment living in the United States of America in the year 2023 or Western Europe, and you still believe this stuff. You need to grow up. Okay, sorry, that was a little rant.
Yeah, well, I think just like I think it's symbolic almost of like how even if you're secular, there's superstition and so many things that we do like just because of like our biology that like you could never really justify Like when somebody sneezes, like a lot of times we'll say like "Gesundheit" or "God bless you" or something like that. Like what? That's just like a social cue. It doesn't.
Let's make this simple, okay? Let's get you in a brand new car of atheism today. That fresh new smell. Do you believe that God wants people to go to hell?
No.
No. Do you believe that God knows that prior to creation that some, if he did create, some would go to hell?
Yes.
Do you believe he wanted to create knowing this?
I do.
Okay. Can I repeat back to me what you just said? You just said that God knows that if he creates, some people go to hell. He wanted to create knowing this anyhow, and yet he doesn't want anyone to go to hell. You don't see a contradiction there.
I don't, because I don't think his knowledge, and maybe it is the Molinist like thing that you're talking about, because like
His knowledge is not causing it. I'll give you that. But what I'm saying is that the counterfactual of if he didn't create, he got his goal of no one going to hell. By creating, it goes against his goal of no people going to hell.
Right. But I guess what I'm saying is like, isn't that the quagmire then? Because like, no matter what God would choose to do, there's going to be a downside. Like if he
What's
didn't
the
create,
downside to not creating?
that we don't get to experience. So it would be like me
Oh,
saying, what's the
boo-hoo
downside
us.
Huh?
Boo-hoo us. Oh, I mean, I'm so glad God created me, because if he didn't, I'd be crying. I'd be so sad if God didn't create me. Listen to yourself. There's no downside to not creating for an omniscient, omnipotent, all-powerful, all-loving God.
Not for him.
Right,
Not for him.
right. Who cares about us? We're talking about him prior to creation. Should I create or not?
Right. But I guess but this almost illustrates my point, because like if he was just being selfish, he could just be like, I don't need these people. I'm not going to bother creating. But if he was actually doing it for our benefit,
was he doing it for the benefit of someone who goes to hell?
No. Well, in theory, that he was giving them the opportunity, like,
right. But he knew with 100% certainty that they would use their free will to choose to reject him, and he created them anyhow. Did he do it for their benefit?
He did, in an abstract sense, like
an abstract sense. I do not want anyone to perish. It says that in the scriptures. Yet he creates with 100% certainty, knowing that people will perish using their own free will. And he created them anyhow. I want none to perish, and I want to create knowing people will. Want, not want. Contradiction. This is the real problem of evil. Not want, not want.
Right.
And the only way around this, if you want to stay a Christian, is to say, become an open theist, say God doesn't know the future, and he was surprised. They sinned against me? I never saw that coming. Like, you can go that route, or say, or reduce his omnipotence, say, God is not all that. He's not all good. He needs to create to make more good. He's lonely. He's in isolation. I need someone to talk to, even though I'm in three persons and I could talk to myself, but still I need more. Like, you can do that. You can say he's not free. He's a God that's a robot that had to create. Right. So those are three outs you could do.
Or the universalism thing that you were saying.
Well, okay, the universalism thing helps, but doesn't get you out of earthly suffering. Because God could have created everyone that he knew would freely choose him and just, boop, put him in heaven. And avoid all the pain and suffering here on planet Earth. He could have just, in fact, scratch that. It doesn't matter if you believe in him or not. He could have just said, I'm going to put everyone in heaven where they can freely choose to worship me, and they have zero desire to not to. I mean, this is what the Frank Turks of the world say, right? He could have just plopped them all in heaven where everybody lives happily, no tears are shed. But he didn't. He goes, oh, no. I want to see a few rapes here and there. It's character building. Right? This is the explanations even the universalists give. It's nuts.
Yeah, no, I mean,
if you want to remain a theist, here's my suggestion. Just believe a God is non-interventionist. He created everything, and gives you explanation of why we're here. Why is there something rather than nothing? Maybe there's this moral law, but this God doesn't care to really tell us clearly what it is in every situation, in every context. Just become some type of deist, and that will help you survive, give you a little bit of hope, meaning, and purpose. And then you,
No, but I'm not doing it. I'm not doing it for like, basically like my short-term benefit. Like you, like and most people in your chat, I think, like I'm trying to find the truth, and even if the truth is something that like it's very possible, like what you're hypo about, like why didn't he just put us in heaven? Like I don't know the answer to that. It could be like it's an incoherent concept for him to do something like that.
but when I applaud you for wanting to find the truth, but when you find these severe, I won't call them contradictions, but when you find these severe tensions within a worldview, instead of trying to come up with excuses to make it fit because of some need or desire in you, just be open to the idea, maybe it's just false. Maybe this God does not exist, and you're done.
No, you're right about that. You got to be open to that. I totally agree with that.
And by the way, I don't think there's a good reason to think any God exists, even the deist one. Like, because you can say, well, the universe is just the cosmos, not our universe. The cosmos is just some type of form of matter or energy, has just always existed. And yes, a random quantum fluctuation might have started the Big Bang, and billions of years of chemical and biological evolution took place. And it's a miracle that we exist and we are conscious and we can talk. But no God required for any of that.
No, you're right. I mean, I don't think it's required. But it's unexplained, and it may not be consistent with our understanding of the physical world. I mean, if everything appears to be, everything, at least at this stage in the process, appears to be contingent. But you're right. I mean, I think there are a lot of cosmologists that think like if you go far enough back, like you end up with some sort of starting singularity.
Okay, so where are we left here? What's there left to talk about?
Well, probably not too much, man.
I think we've discussed it all, right?
Yeah, I think we did one fell swoop.
Like,
I'll have to take it up with your chat.
And I don't know what's like. We've been talking high level theism type stuff, the real problem of evil. I don't know what impacts you more, that type of discussion, or if we were actually to dive deep into the muck and mire of the Bible or the Quran or the Book of Mormon and contradictions or tensions there, if that would sway you more. But I perceive from you, you're more of a high level thinker, so that's why I'm going top down with you.
Yeah, exactly. And I got to read up like on the Bible and stuff.
My guess is, you don't even care that much about the Bible, do you?
No, I mean, like I care in the sense where like have you seen that show, The Chosen?
I've heard of it.
Yeah, I've only caught like 20 minutes of it, but it's a really like such a well-made story. I'm probably assuming most people that watch it are believers, but it's like very compelling drama. Like if somebody just likes drama, and so like the story of like the historical Jesus, like just that time period, that part of the world, like to me, it's a very fascinating like case study of like what actually happened. So from that perspective, it's like something I'm interested in. But it's just I haven't, like it's just something I haven't really delved like deeply into, so I wouldn't be able to have like a really educated conversation about it. But I think it's certainly like that's certainly like if that's what's interesting about Christianity. It is falsifiable, like those on a certain level, like it makes a claim like he rose from the dead. Like if you could prove he didn't, like then it's completely
but even then, how would you, in the year 2023, how would you prove that he didn't with certainty? Like you can't. I mean, not certainty, but even at 99.9% confidence, there's always something someone can say like, oh, here lies the bones of Jesus, so that he didn't rise from the dead. Well, do we have a DNA of Jesus while he was living? DNA of him that we could match? No. I mean,
yeah. No, that's true. That's true.
You
It
have
would
to
be
come at it from what's more likely, that people make stories up that are, some of the things are based on reality, or that a man rose from the dead. Like, it doesn't take a lot of more deep theology or philosophy than that.
No, that's true. But we talked about this. They martyred themselves. So I mean, like they certainly believed it to be true.
Yeah, and a lot of Christians are led to believe that. When I was a Christian, I kind of thought that too. I thought, oh, why would they lie about this if there's a gun pointed to their head, and either you recant or we're going to kill you. Did Jesus rise from the dead? Yeah, he did. Boom. Like, that's the picture in most Christians' head of what happened. And I think that all the evidence points that's not what happened. Number one, we don't know if they had the chance to recant. We don't know that they died for their belief in the resurrection. We don't even know if they saw the resurrection, whoever was killed and martyred at that point, if they saw, because again, we only have one eyewitness account in all of the New Testament that says, I saw this. The rest is hearsay, third-party accounts. And all the martyrdoms, not all, most of the martyrdom stories are centuries after the fact, written in books that Christians scoff at. Oh, this is obviously untrue. Oh, but this martyrdom story is true. I mean, it's ridiculous.
Right. No, I mean that's true, but don't you think I think the challenge is explaining there was no Jewish notion of a risen Messiah. Like, they had false prophets, they were killed, and there was never a story about somebody rising from the dead. It just wasn't part of the Jewish folklore, part of their way of thinking about anything. So all of a sudden,
I don't think that's true. I think there was some sects of Judaism that did believe that.
No, I think you're right. There was this idea that people were resurrected,
right.
But I think it was
and Jesus was the first fruits of the resurrection. So they used the stories ideas, the themes that they already believed. That's why I think Christianity started at the Essene movement. It was a more of a pacifistic type of religion, sect of Judaism, and you can't. The Old Testament is the framework, is the basis for the New Testament. There's no denying that. And Christians love to hear me say that, because they say, "Oh yeah, look at the prophecies and everything." But then it shoots them in the foot, because then you can say, a guy like me can say, well, yeah, these are stories built upon former stories. The New Testament is a sequel. It's the Matrix Revolutions to the original Matrix.
Yeah. I mean, and I don't know enough about the Old Testament to fully comment on it, but no, absolutely.
See, the Messiah, right. in most Jewish thought, the Messiah was supposed to be a king to take over the world.
Right.
So here, and like the previous caller talked about with Daniel 9, there's these ideas of prophecies that the Messiah would come around in the first century. So guess what? There was a bunch of so-called claimed messiahs in the first century. Jesus was probably a guy who came out of the Essene movement, who had a following, who preached from place to place. But guess what? They couldn't get Jesus' picture on a coin. They couldn't get Jesus to be this Messiah figure talked about that most Jews believed in that would take over the world. So guess what? He had to rise from the dead in order to come back a second time to accomplish the goal that they believed in, that the taking over the world.
I mean, that would be one explanation. It would be a very convoluted thing. I mean, this was somebody that was claiming. I mean, if you take what he was claiming at face value, maybe somehow these stories were manipulated and fabricated, but then you'd have to kind of hypothesize, why is that happening? Because ultimately, unlike Muhammad,
to start a new religion.
Well, yeah, but that's what almost what I'm pointing to, with something in Islam, you could see the motivation for having a warrior person, and they came and swept over and dominated this vast swath of area. And Christianity
understood, but what would be the naturalistic motivation to start Christianity?
I don't know. I mean, that's what I'm saying. I don't know if I see a
Okay, let me propose one. The Jews in the first century were sick and tired of always being second fiddle to the greater nations on the planet. Here, they were led to believe that they were the chosen ones. They were led to believe that they were the primo nation, a primo tribe, and yet suffering. So then, what better way to flip the script and say that we are chosen because of our suffering? We can actually overcome Rome and the powers that be of the world by pacifistic submission, saying, because our kingdom is not of this earth. Like, it's very easy to say, hey, if you're bragging all the time, you're the best, God's chosen people, yet you cannot solidify a nation. Here's a good out. Well, our nation's not on planet Earth. I mean, not this kingdom, it's some beyond. So they had this real idea of how to bring peace, hope, and meaning to the Jewish people by saying they can kill us, but to die is gain, because our kingdom is outside this one. I mean, it brings people like to tears. It's like, oh, yeah. I finally get it. This is why we've had to suffer and all these things. Now, the Orthodox Jews, they still believe that, no, it's going to be a real Jewish kingdom in the future. But for the Christian sect that came out of Judaism, this was a great out. This brings meaning and understanding to everyone. It's like, oh, we don't have to fight against Rome, because our battle's not against human flesh. It's against principalities and demons and angels. They just totally flipped the script. They cannot lose with that belief system. They're winners no matter what.
That would be some next level shit. I give you that.
That was good what I just said. I've never said that.
That was. No, that was a very...
I got to clip that.
Exactly. That was you're a good storyteller, man. I'll give you that.
I could be a gospel author.
I guess in order for that to come together, you would have to have almost a conspiracy of events unfold, because you'd have to have like Jesus, like you'd have to have somebody like him willing to do this. And then
no. This happened after the fact. So these ideas, that rant I just gave, basically this charismatic scene leader doing his preaching thing from place to place ends up dying, and the people are devastated who followed him. Now they're trying to make sense of it, and that now insert my rant now. So now they start making up these stories, and this is why it took decades to make. The last gospel was like the late first century. So as this story unfolded, as it was molded, as it was added to, some things were subtracted, it was finalized. But it wasn't like all this was planned ahead of time. No, I'm not saying that.
Okay. Right. Okay. Well, that's more plausible then. I mean, so basically it would almost be like kind of Jesus was like sort of like a failed Messiah. And then afterwards, almost to salvage like something out of it, they like came up with this. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Yeah. He failed. Or I don't even know what he failed at, but he ended up just dying, and people were devastated and trying to make sense of it. If he is God, how can God die, right?
Right.
And even concepts of the Trinity and what it really means to be God in flesh, what it means to be a Messiah, is that different than the Son of God? All these things were like massaged and thought about and developed decades after.
I mean, by failed, I mean, like, you know, if he was the Messiah, I thought their concept of the Messiah would be like he would come and kind of, like you said, like liberate the Jewish.
Yeah, that he definitely failed at.
Yeah. And so they, you know, well, listen, man, you gave me a lot to think of.
There's a very easy naturalistic explanation for Jesus, for Christianity. All religions start with one or two people. I think with Christianity, it started with maybe one of his disciples like Peter, and maybe a guy named Paul. He's definitely the first one to write about it. And these ideas developed and spread over time. And then Rome made it an official religion. That sure helped to spread it.
Rome did what, like in 300,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Yeah.
Like people also have this huge, I think, misconception that Christianity was huge. Like, I don't know, millions and millions of people. I don't think so. Nobody can say for sure, but
Yeah.
I think it
Yeah,
really
I mean,
took
right.
off probably 2, 3, 4, well, 3, 400 AD.
Yeah, I guess that's like that would be a key piece of information, is like what happened between like his death and like 300 AD.
Like if Rome wasn't in this picture, do you think Western Europe would be Christian today?
Um, I mean, it's certainly a huge part of it culturally.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah, it's because of Rome, not because of
yeah,
Jesus.
yeah. No, Rome certainly had a huge part of it. I agree with that. I mean, it's tough. It's one of those things where it's like it happened during a moment of it's what's interesting about it is like one of the critiques is like, why didn't this happen, like what now when we would have proof of it, and it's like this
Yes.
but it all goes back to this idea that like it's not supposed to be like shoved down our throat. We're supposed to have like the freedom to.
But isn't that
It's like,
curious? Like you just made a very good observation. Why couldn't Jesus have come today instead of 2,000 years ago when we didn't have iPhones? We didn't have airplanes where people from all nations could see Jesus at one time, verify, write things down. I mean, if you're going to create a religion like Christianity, 2,000 years ago is a good time to do it in settled areas of Rome, where if it catches on, it can spread because they had the infrastructure, the roads, the wealth. I mean, and the thing is, Christianity even admits that unless you're a cessationalist, that Christians can do the things Jesus did as with the Holy Spirit in them. Well, okay, then do it. Raise the dead, walk on water, in tested conditions with various biases present. But no, we don't see it, do we? It's always these small remote places in Africa where someone rises from the dead. I mean, if this God is real, hey God, if you're listening right now, get real, get serious. Like if you want to actually convince people that you exist, then do stuff. In fact, even do bad stuff if you want, like strike people down, punish them for sinning, like you did with Ananias and Sapphira. God, are you listening? If someone cheats on their taxes, if someone cheats on the church that affects the widows and orphans, strike them dead in front of everyone. Have a prophet come out and say, God has told me that this person has cheated, and we're going to strike them dead in front of the public square. Are you listening,
Yeah.
God? Do it. At least know you're there.
But the issue with that is that while that might accomplish the goal of convincing people God exists, that's not like under Christianity, the purpose of life isn't just to know that God exists.
Well, okay, but isn't that a great start? Theists always tell me, well, Doug, in order to believe in Christianity, you got to at least know God exists first, right? You got to at least know that this omnipotent being is possible, the miracles are possible, and Jesus rose from the dead. They tell me that's the first step. Okay, first step is let's all agree that this God exists first, and then we can choose whether or not to serve him, right?
Yeah, somebody like you, I totally agree with. Like, I think you're the type of person that, like, if there was more evidence, I think you would follow it.
I would. My whole worldview would be shattered if the things I'm talking about would happen.
Yeah,
I'm not a stubborn atheist like some of them in the live stream chat right now. They say, well, that could be an alien, or it could be some natural law that we're not aware of. No, I tell you, if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. But if I see someone who I personally know has been dead for years, like my sister, and raised from the dead in the name of Jesus, I'm done. Naturalism is done. And I don't care if I'm wrong or not. That's enough for me. That's sufficient. And yet this God who has done apparently this in the New Testament won't do it today, at least every 3 months around the world, and announce ahead of time that he's going to do it so we can verify it and test it. Won't do it? I mean, that is petty of this God. Like if he truly desires people to to at least have a chance to believe in him.
Yeah, I mean, the only justification I could come up with for not doing it is like that the effect of doing that might be that it might turn a lot of people off.
Oh, come
That God,
on.
you don't think people would be afraid almost of God? Like it would strike
Well,
fear
that's
in
the
people.
point, right?
Well, no, I don't think God wants people to be afraid.
The fear of God is the beginning of knowledge, it says in the Old Testament.
It says what?
The fear of God is the beginning of knowledge. The scriptures say this.
Well, that might be something that people say, like, I mean, but I don't think God wants people to be afraid of him, because then it's like that's almost like a cruel being that is like that. He wants people to love him, and so it could be like out of just again, a lot of these things, it's like there's going to be like a problem no matter how you come out.
But
like if he
but
does that,
the problem of even having a discussion, a debate of whether this particular God exists, it can be solved so easily, in my opinion. If this God actually just came down, announced ahead of time, he's going to do X, Y, and Z. We set up tested conditions. We're not trying to trick ourselves. We know these are not magicians. And
oh yeah,
I mean, I cannot fathom why a God, all-powerful God who actually desires relationship with people would not do this at least once every 3 months in different countries in the world. Announce ahead of time, like he did apparently in the scriptures, like with prophecies, like the 70 weeks prophecies. That's God announcing ahead of time, right? That he's going to come, the Messiah is going to come. Well, do it today.
yeah. Well, just to make an analogy, I'm not sure if you ever read that book Contact by Carl Sagan.
I saw the movie.
Okay, so when we finally get contact by the ancient civilization, the world like gets turned upside down. You have so much turmoil and strife because half the world is fearing like we're going to get like blown to smithereens. And so that's the only type of justification I could think of, which is like if
So
he
God
did
wants to stay hidden so we don't go crazy?
not stay hidden. Look, I agree, I have a lot of sympathy with the hiddenness issue, like a problem, because that is a real problem. So I'm not like trying to downplay that. I'm just saying like if it was so overt, where it was just like I could see that like on one level, it's like in the conversation me and you are having right now, it's like proof that would solve the problem, and we would think like for a lot of smart, educated people, like probably watching this and maybe like elsewhere, like in the West or wherever, like they could just take that information in. They could like kind of absorb it into like their worldview. They're educated. They're stable people. Like they would be able to like.
What I'm proposing, God every quarter, like the earnings cycle in S&P 500, every 3 months. I mean, but you know, Christians always tell me, in fact, even today, you need this concept of God so people can do the right thing. And a little bit of fear is good. A little bit of fear of judgment that God's watching. Yeah. Okay, I'm proposing that. I'm proposing that the next time someone murders another person, have a prophet of God come and say, okay, we know the situation is about to unfold. Get the media and everything. And the person standing there, God's going to judge them right now. Poof, they're dead. I tell you, the murders will go down in the world. Rapes will go down in the world if every rapist knew. Oh, I saw on TV the other day a rapist, God struck him dead. I'm not going to take the chance. Like if you want this real fear thing to work to help morality, okay, God, start doing stuff then. Start striking people dead instead of waiting till after they die to punish them.
It could no, you're right. It could have that effect, but I think the balancing act is that like it's supposed to be like a free choice, because then we're back to like he could have made us as robots, and it's like if it's
okay, just strike dead 1 out of every 100. That'll be enough of a deterrent, but still people have the free will to take the chance. That's better than God not doing anything.
Yeah, but that's the thing, because like most of the world does believe in God, so it's like isn't the atheist community really like in the minority here?
Oh, definitely, yeah.
So maybe like maybe things are set up in a way where like most people.
But I think that's changing rapidly because of the Enlightenment. I think that in Western nations in Europe, you're seeing atheism is still minority. Atheism is a dirty word, but if you ask people, like, do they actively believe it? Meaning, do they live their life like it's true? I wouldn't be surprised in Western Europe, it's close to 30, 40, 50% of people
Yeah.
who they're basically functional atheists. And in the United States, atheism is what, 6%, 4%. But people, the nuns who functionally act as naturalists, as atheists, maybe not naturalists, but atheists, that's what, 20% in the United States already? And it's growing every day. It's one of the only demographic groups that's exponential to the upside.
But I guess the question is that because, like, I guess the question is, why is that happening?
Because they're listening to me. And people like me. I mean, it's just divine hiddenness, like you said, the points we're bringing up, the problem of evil. Most people, I guess, might not want to say they're an atheist, but and go to, well, yeah, I just believe in a higher power. But really, how they live their life day to day is no different than me.
Yep.
They're not scared of a higher power. They're not hoping for, well, I guess some of them hope for heaven, but even the concept of heaven, people are waning of. Like, there's so many Christians out there who fear heaven. Did you know that?
That fear heaven?
Yes.
No, I haven't heard of that. Why would they fear heaven?
They fear heaven for the exact same reason I do. They do not want to live forever. Now, I'm not sure how many of them are out there, but I bet you it's like maybe 10% of Christians are scared of heaven.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think that's probably true. It is kind of like a very big thing to get your head around, like the idea of like eternal.
Because it's an unknown, right? It's like
yeah.
No Christian could tell me that they know with a high degree of confidence. Like, even using the scriptures, they don't know what heaven's all about. They know there's no tears there. Maybe there's a mansion, but is it a real mansion? Does it look like Trump's place? I mean, they don't know.
Yeah. Did you ever see that movie Defending Your Life?
No.
With Albert Brooks, Meryl Streep. Oh, you would love it. It's a black comedy, and it's while it's based on this idea of there being an afterlife, it's
when you say black comedy, you mean like Will Smith and Chris Rock, or?
Exactly.
Oh, I've offended the woke atheists in here now.
You're gonna get us in trouble now.
The African Americans are laughing with us, but not those white woke people.
Yeah, exactly. The woke police have their sirens out. But no, you should. It's a great flick. But there's this idea of like kind of like something happens. It's a parody almost like of like the idea of heaven on like a certain level, and but like there's this kind of notion that like they so Meryl not to, it's not a spoiler at all, but like Meryl Streep's character like doesn't have like her loved one or child with with her on that step that her and Albert Brooks are taking like after they die, and she's just like, I'm just okay. She's like, I think they do that. Like it's just left like unexplained, like what it really means in the movie. But it just, I could envision it just being something like that, where like for us to try to make sense of it, like it's probably something that's like not really comprehensible to us.
Yeah, some people ask me, Doug, don't you want to be with your wife for eternity in heaven? No. I love my wife. I love her deeply. I've committed my life to her, but I don't want to live forever. I mean,
yeah, well,
like,
but that's because I wouldn't either if it was like this life, like that I have like right now with like my physical body or even
okay,
my physical.
But then we got this problem of what life is it? Like if there's any concept of achieving goals, like is there concepts of achieving goals in heaven? I like achieving goals. I like overcoming obstacles. If there's no obstacles to overcome in heaven, to me that's boring. Now if everything's going to be different, that the concepts of boring is not even on the table, then what are we really talking about? Like if there's no tears in heaven, that means there may be joy in heaven. Okay, but what kind of joy is it? Like, is it the cheesecake eating type of joy? And if so, does that mean there's actual cheesecake? And if there's cheesecake, does that mean I'll actually have diarrhea the next day? I mean, it's all just craziness.
Yeah, yeah. Well, because I think in part because of our concept of time, and if it's like if time passes differently in heaven, then even the idea of saying like forever, because like the way you describe forever just seems like to be like after like 3 million years, I would be like done with it. But if there's not that sense of time passing like in that way, and there's just more like you're in heaven like timelessly, then you're not going to be sitting there being like, oh, it's been 3 million years and I'm bored of being here. You just like you'll just perceive things differently.
Yeah. Anyhow, Baked Alaska, nice talking to you.
All right, man. Be good.
I will, because God's watching.
Oh, hope to see you on the poker streets one day. I heard you're good at poker.
Yeah, are you gonna sign up? Or you email me?
All right. How do I do that?
Let me put it in the chat here.
All right, cool.
You gotta watch out for a guy named Ray, though.
He's a shark?
He's more like a whale. Okay, you see it?
I won't tell him you said that. All right, man.
Yeah, email me. I'll put you on the list.
All right, well.
Take care.
All right, be good.
Are you here, Ray? Okay. A few minutes of reading the chat. In the afterlife, Doug will be reunited with his mustache. Oh yeah, Bill, how did it go? I went this... Hang on, turn this down a bit. I went last weekend to see Frank Turk and they stopped taking questions right when I got to the microphone. Whoa. You know, I bet you Frank Turk doesn't even realize I have a mustache now. I could probably go sneak in. They wouldn't recognize me. I wonder if Frank Turek knows who I am. Say my name, Frank Turek. I appreciate all the callers. Yes, I do too. Even the ones who believe in the fuzzy consciousness, therefore God, fuzzy objective morality, therefore God. PineCreek, you're my hero, says Dungeon Chunks. Hey, Dungeon Chunks, please don't ever meet me. Keep this hero concept in your head for as long as possible. Yeah, I'll be selling mustache wax next week. They'll be my sponsor. That'd be funny. I should find a real mustache wax sponsor. Every live stream I do, Frank says that I make sense. Have a great weekend, guys.